You're driving down the highway, and somewhere between the on-ramp and your exit, you deliver the absolute perfect response to a comment your manager made 3 weeks ago. Or maybe you're in the shower, rehearsing a blistering argument with someone who doesn't even know they've upset you yet. Most people snap out of this. The car horn honks, the water gets cold, and they return to reality. But for a specific type of mind, these internal simulations act as a primary place of residence. People rarely identify this experience as a problem because from the inside, stepping into an imagined scenario feels like profound, immediate relief. When an internal narrative consistently provides a sense of peace that the outside environment lacks, the brain makes a logical choice. Physical reality begins to feel inadequate, and the mind starts pulling away. This diagram illustrates the default mode network. It activates when sensory input drops off. Typically, it generates memories and scripts rehearsed conversations, but for some, it becomes the default setting, overriding the cognitive space and constantly running internal simulations. Because the brain decides the internal simulation is significantly more rewarding, external reality starts to lose its texture. The real world out in front of you begins to feel thin, flat, and devoid of substance. The brain is actively choosing its own generated simulation over physical existence, effectively turning inward to find the engagement the outside world is failing to provide. Clinical psychologist Professor Eli Sommer formally identified this behavioral pattern in 2002. He gave it a specific clinical name, maladaptive daydreaming. People report spending hours, often the majority of their waking day, inside meticulously constructed narratives. They built detailed worlds with recurring characters and complex plots that evolve over months or even years. Many highly imaginative professionals never exhibit this behavior, while individuals who have never written a single word of fiction do it compulsively every day. The research connects this behavior to a specific personality trait called high absorption. This is the capacity for deep, immersive focus. People with high absorption are the ones who get profoundly lost in a piece of music or feel emotionally wrecked for days after watching a film. Because these individuals experience external stimuli with intense gravity, the friction of daily life can become overwhelming. To manage that flood of feeling, their brain constructs a private, tightly controlled room where they can process emotions entirely on their own terms. The imagined scenarios offer highly specific emotional utilities. They give the individual absolute control, a guaranteed path to emotional resolution, and a version of human connection that feels entirely safe. In a daydream, you can rewind a conversation until the other person finally understands you perfectly. Real intimacy involves slowness, unpredictability, and a massive amount of sitting with uncomfortable uncertainty. The internal fantasy eliminates that friction completely. This flowchart illustrates the shame spiral. It begins when the brain learns emotional needs can be met entirely internally. Surfacing carries an emotional aftertaste. The world kept moving. Guilt feeds deep shame, creating new distress, driving you right back into the habit to cope. The daydream operates as a highly efficient, self-reinforcing survival mechanism. It is constructed by a nervous system attempting to adapt to an environment that initially lacked emotional safety. The ability to engineer entire, coherent worlds, complete with emotional nuance and complex character motivations, is an impressive cognitive capability. It points to an enormous amount of internal richness. Somewhere along the way, the individual arrived at an internalized conclusion. Their profound emotional depth was only safe if it remained entirely invisible to the outside world. When people recognize this pattern in themselves, their first instinct is often to try to eliminate the inner world completely. But treating the imagination as an enemy makes very little psychological sense, and actively fighting the coping mechanism usually increases the distress. The research points in a different direction. The objective is to use the daydream as a highly accurate diagnostic map. The content of the fantasy shows you exactly what your mind is missing in reality. Look closely at the scenarios you rehearse. What version of connection are you constructing that you are just not letting yourself ask for out loud? What emotional resolution are you demanding in the simulation because you are too afraid to pursue it in your actual life? The goal is to study the blueprints of that internal architecture and then begin the slow, admittedly awkward work of translating those hidden needs into real-world action.